My name's Stanley Saitowitz, and I'm the design principal of the firm, which is Natoma Architects. And we're a firm in San Francisco. We've been working here for many years, and we focus on a variety of projects that basically anything where we think architecture is possible. So any project that we think we can contribute to the dialogue of architecture, we are happy to engage in. So we don't have any specialties particularly, although often because we've done certain projects we get more of them. Architecture is everything. It's the sort of pivot that all of the interests that I have are looked through, and so I consider everything to revolve around this hub or to be seen through this lens. So really I don't have a definition, because it's being alive is architecture for me. I mean, architects have a very specific role which is different from farmers or chefs or doctors, which is to produce the sort of spatial environment that sustains life. And it's a very critical thing. I mean, it's as important for life as food. I mean, shelter is one of the most basic requirements, and I think one of the important things that architecture has to strive for is to produce a quantity of quality, to make models and to produce architecture for everyone, as well as to deal with the sort of exceptional expressions of cultural significance. But I mean, in general, I think architecture is not a luxurious operation or something that's exotic or about uniqueness. It's actually about a broad spectrum. And I mean, I think they're fantastic models, like, you know, the jeans that Levi Strauss made, or the cars that were produced by VW. I just think that architecture needs to work at that level as well as at the level of high art and refined sort of products. So those are the sort of goals I think that architecture needs to address. You know, I would rather think of our practice in terms of a balance between innovation and refinement, and I think much more about a model of, say, the way a practice like Mies van der Rohe's practice developed. So we are interested in the kind of development of various sort of streams of work that have been going on in this office over many years. And, you know, like one of the models that I like to think about is the Porsche as an enterprise, where the car is totally rebuilt, and every single component is new every time there's a new major model. But as well as being entirely new, there's a kind of continuity with the history of the car, so that it's not about innovation for its own sake, it's about innovation in terms of real change and real progress. So we're not really that interested in novelty, which I think is one way that sometimes innovation seems to be construed, but rather in terms of refinement and constant progress, but sometimes in ways that are less immediate or less obvious. So Mies really, I think, is an amazing sort of example where you can see the way in his work in the 50s when he came to America, for example, you know, the curtain wall evolved out of first the brick skin, and then after using, materials, there was a constant kind of like development and like economy and refinement, but it was always sort of based on a tradition that he developed through. We try to do our work really well and let our work actually be the voice of our social networking. So, we don't have like a marketing campaign, or, we really build relations piece by piece with the people who find us and seek us out to work with us. We're not about a sort of marketing strategies or anything like that. But really our work has been the vehicle that has brought us more work. So it's by doing the work well and by the kind of appreciation of that work and recognition of that work has continued to come to us. Is that what you were thinking about in terms of networking? So, I know you guys are interested in the networks, and, we obviously use the media that is available, but, really I think our practice is actually based on a quite small community of people that come back and work with us again and again. And out of that, we've also been able to get work in a broader environment. Like we now have work, in different parts of America, but it's really because of the work that we've done here locally that we've got recognition for, that those clients have come to us. I would go to a school where there are really good students and where the community of the school is really intense. And I think really the most important thing at school is just the community of students who you work with. I think the atmosphere is created by the school and the faculty and its traditions, but really it's about the people who you study with. My own educational experience was in a very remote place in South Africa, like very far from the center of things. But the students who were at the school, because we felt so disconnected and remote, made a huge effort to constantly be exploring what was going on in the rest of the world. And we were actually, in many ways, I think, much more aggressively educating ourselves than students at Berkeley, for example, where I've taught for, like 30 years, and where students feel like they're in the middle of things and they don't have to sort of make such an effort. They expect more to be given to them. So, I think the kind of curiosity that the body of students develop for themselves becomes really important. But, I think there's many factors that make schools good. I think the schools in America have a very high intellectual sort of standard, and then are much less interested in the kind of realities of architecture, whereas schools in like Spain and Europe and Japan seem to teach architecture in a more complete way, because architecture is obviously a mental discipline, but it's also an act of production and the making of things. And sometimes, the educational sort of traditions emphasize one thing much more strongly than another. And so I think a balance of those things is important, that it's both a mental activity and an act. I started practice when I was at school in South Africa, in Johannesburg, in the time that I was living there, which was in the mid-70s. There were lots of opportunities to build buildings, and even though I was still at school, I built my first project, which was remodeling the house next door to where I grew up, probably in my third year. And I started working very early on, and for my thesis in South Africa, I actually built the project, which was a house for an artist. So I sort of fell into practice very naturally, just by the circumstances that I was in. And before I left South Africa, I'd already built 4 houses. And so, I really always was practicing as well as being a student. And I also always have been a teacher. Like, I've never left school in a real way. I taught in Johannesburg. Before I graduated, I was a TA, and then I became a faculty member. And then when I moved to Berkeley, after my second semester, I was already teaching as well. So I've always sort of done the practice and the theory part concurrently and overlapping. I've always been more interested in the quality of what we do than the size of the practice. A lot of people seem to set themselves goals of becoming, like big offices. And I've always felt that the only interest for me in having a practice is to be able to work on the projects. And that if I was going to have a practice where I wasn't able to really engage in the projects, but was just sort of, managing things, or like had 10 offices spread around like so many of the successful firms have evolved into, it wouldn't be my goal. So, the size of the practice, I think, is sort of very important for me, that it's, a small family of people. And the people that work here, many of us have worked together for, like 15 years, even longer actually. So, I think that's quite important to the way we operate, that it's a small group of people, and it's like a family practice.